Welcome to Behind the Build. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs. And today I have with me, I'm going to call her a trailblazer, highly respected and reputable individual who has been practicing for more than a decade. I have with me today Janna Levitt from LGA Architectural Partners. Janna, thanks for joining.
My pleasure to be here.
So I had reached out to Janna. Both she was on my radar to connect with, but also I've had people that have said they would love to hear Janna's story and have her tell it. So Janna, I would ask if you're so kind as to go into the time portal and talk about you as a child and what it looked like for you and what ultimately kind of led you down the path to becoming an architect and helping shape, I know, a lot of other people's careers. And so if you wouldn't mind, let me and let everyone else know what really sparked your interest in getting into the field.
Okay. Well, if I go really far back into the portal,
Yep.
I would say generally my interest was in the arts and in creative endeavors from very early on. And I would say that's because of primarily my mother. She was a master potter, a ceramic artist who, when there was the federal government for about 5 minutes, had a program that was based on the Japanese program for national treasures. And my mother was a national treasure in ceramics. And because we lived in a big house and most ceramic artists that my mother was friends with and knew around the world didn't have a lot of money, our house became like the rooming house for ceramic artists and then any kind of artist who was in town for whatever reason.
Okay.
And so we were always sitting around the dining table or the kitchen nook with interesting people from all around the world. And
how did they find her?
I think, it was a very small community.
Okay.
And so if you were like a ceramic artist, it was even a smaller community, but they still had people who had, they would bring people in for talks. And she learned, actually, it was interesting. She learned pottery, which was what it was called then, at the Jewish Y at Spadina and Bloor.
And so this is all in Toronto.
Is all in Toronto.
Yeah.
My family's from Montreal originally, and then they moved to Toronto.
Okay.
And so that was the first place that she took pottery. And her teacher was a woman named Chiz who had been in the internment camps during the war out west. She was a Japanese Canadian originally from BC. And so through there, she started to meet Japanese potters. And then we had a lot of Japanese potters come and stay with us, and they would have workshops. And then my mother and my father as well were really interested, learned to really love Indigenous artists' work. And so they were early collectors and supporters of Norval Morrisseau and Carl Beam and what was then called the Woodland Artists, the Woodland Indian Artists. And they were all the ones that came from Northern Ontario around Manitoulin Island. And it's Angus Trudeau, another one. And so again, those folks were always in our house. They were always coming for dinner. There were always crazy dinner parties, very wild, many alcohol-fueled moments in there. And so it was just a really great place to grow up and not a lot of rules about what and wasn't creative and what and wasn't art. So I actually ended up going, and I have a big family, and my father had two brothers, and all three brothers lived about 2 blocks from each other. And so there were a lot of us, and 2 of my older cousins were architects. And, it was at a point, I'm really at the young end of it, and they were at the older end. It was like, I don't want to do what they're doing. Like, I want to straight out on my own.
Yeah, I want to do something for myself.
Carve my own path. Myself.
Yeah.
So I ended up, because I loved arts and art from the beginning, I ended up going to art school. And I did that for a couple of years. And I found that as much as I loved art, I didn't love being holed up in a studio. I really loved arts that put you in the center, a very active and externalized contexts,
Okay.
and that you could make things in relation to that. And when I was in art school, it was a very political time for art. So lots of installations and happenings, a lot of quoting social scientists and philosophers. And because I hadn't studied that, I didn't know what people were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going to U of T, and I studied political science and cinema studies, which seems like an odd thing, but it was actually very related to each other.
Of course. Well, it's all because it's all related to like the space that you're in and the
Yeah.
connectivity to it all.
Yeah,
And
and just like how do
you-
you communicate ideas, like
Yeah.
through images.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I decided, okay, I really do love architecture, and I really do want to go to architecture school.
Mhm.
And my father said, you'll never make a living. And I thought, well, I'm going to prove him wrong. And my two older cousins, at that point, I just thought, well, they're employed. I guess they're making a living. Turns out my father was sort of right. If I think about how many hours I work compared to my brothers who are lawyers, and how much hours they work and what their annual compensation is compared to mine, I think my dad was right, but he wasn't right because I managed to do okay. And so I went to architecture school at U of T.
Okay.
And I was there in the bachelor program. That's all there was at that point.
Yep. And is this the time when the bachelor program was a 5-year program?
5-year program. Yeah. And I got I had a degree, but I think I got 2 credits. So I was there for 5 years.
Okay.
And I think I got, I could take 2 less classes. And to this day, if I'm super stressed out, I have a nightmare that I don't really have my degree. That's how stressful architecture school was. That I think I don't really have my degree because I didn't take this one class. And I wake up in this total panic that I've been faking it all these years. Really.
So if you're in school right now and you're listening to this, you have to know that may never leave you.
It never leaves you. It just never does. And it's one of the things, we always joke about with, friends and colleagues. So then, and I was at U of T at a very troubled time. It was the transition from a point when Peter Pragnell and a couple of other professors were getting sort of pushed aside for a newer group of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was lucky because I benefited from 2 very almost polar opposite perspectives on architecture. It was hard to be in a place where you could see the good in both approaches, but I did, and I think I really benefited from that. But at the same time, which leads to all the nightmares, it was not, it was a challenging time, and a challenging time if you were a young woman, because there were not a lot of women.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a friendly profession for women. And there was still a lot of like bro culture still, and a lot of sexual harassment. Although we just didn't see it.
Yeah, well, you didn't know
Yeah, we
that's
just
what it
didn't
was
know.
called.
Yeah. So we would do things like, some professor was trying to hit on someone, in our studio. Like we just would always make sure that there were a couple of us
They're
around.
supported. Yeah.
Yeah, things like that. So, and again, it's exactly what you said. When no one knew that you could actually do something about it, you just toughed it out and supported each other. But so I did that, and then I started to work. And when I was in school, I met my future business and life partner, Dean Goodman. He was in 5th year when I was in 2nd year. And we both felt like, for very different reasons, that what we had experienced so far in architecture school was very conservative in many ways. That there was a lot of, even like the 2 very polar, the 2 binary perspectives on architecture, both of them were similar in that they both had rules about what was and wasn't architecture. And I think from my fine arts background, I didn't really feel like there were any rules. I felt like it was all open, and that what you needed to do was to define what your own interests were, mm-hmm. and how you could participate in architecture based on that. And that the kind of conservative perspective, there's important work and not important work. Some people say capital A architecture, not capital A. Lots of ways to describe it, but there was a real pecking order.
Right.
And this just didn't really interest me. And so we just decided, well, he went off to get work, and I went, I was in school, and then I went off to get work. And by that point, we just decided we're just going to have to start our own practice, because we couldn't find anywhere that we could find a home, in the city at that point
Right.
that was doing the kind of work that we were interested in.
I want to ask a question about when you were in school. Given what you've just described, were there and are there other practitioners now that you went to school with that you still maintain a strong relationship with that were a part of that kind of core unit of support through the course of university?
There are probably a small handful that
Yeah.
between the two of us we're still very good friends with, who do a wide range of things, all in architecture. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Three are not in architecture, and I would say that they all have felt more or less the same way. And although they're participating either in architecture or urban design, have forged their own careers.
Hmm.
Didn't follow conventional paths or necessarily conventional paths.
Well, so it sounds like that you were able to support each other enough through
Yeah.
that time to be able to have the momentum and confidence to be able to go out and
Absolutely. Like I think
take it by the reins.
the practice of being in a studio, I know from my many years of teaching that studio culture sort of goes up and down in schools. And I know all architecture schools are under a lot of pressure financially because a studio program is really expensive per square foot. Like you have one student and a lot of square footage.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of pressure. But I would say, what made me stick with it was the fact that I had a good network of friends. And also, I don't know if they do it now, but when I was in school, they would always partner you up with an older student. So you immediately from day one had someone to ask
Right.
questions. And that's really important.
Yeah, it was a buddy system.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to pull a chute on something, you have someone there to help with the
Mhm.
softer landing.
Absolutely. And whether it's, I don't know, I was too afraid to ask my professor, how do you draw a section? And actually, what is a section? Because those things don't actually get explained.
Yeah.
It's really funny. And so there was always something you could, you didn't have to be worried about asking those kinds of questions.
It's interesting because, in all of the people that I've spoken to so far, no one has ever mentioned the buddy system before. This is
Yeah.
the first I've heard of it. I've heard of co-op programs and I've heard of fantastic professors and I've heard of interesting lectures on other topics, but never of this. It's almost a lost art to what school dynamics can be like
Mhm.
because from my knowledge, it doesn't exist.
That's too bad.
Yeah. I could be wrong. I'm happy if you're listening to this and you know about the program that exists, please let me know. You can email me.
Yeah, I
But-
don't think it happens at U of T anymore. It might have even died when I was there. And I taught at Waterloo for many years.
Yeah.
It didn't exist there either, although what they had there, which was similar, was they would hire students from the older years to be TAs.
Right.
And so that essentially became a kind of buddy system.
Right.
Because you had a more collegial relationship with those.
Yeah. Well, they were closer to you than they were
Yeah.
to the
And you'd see them
practitioner.
at their studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you said it was you and Dean that decided that you wanted to go and formulate your own practice. And did you, when that decision was made, you were been living together,
Mhm.
and so what did it look like? Because at that point now you have time, right, to be able to, in some ways, plan what you want to do potentially. And I've spoken to many people, and they're like, "Oh, I had no business plan. We just knew that we needed to change it." Did you create a business plan?
No. We didn't have a business plan for many, many years. And I would say it's one of the changes I find younger colleagues
Yeah.
are much more business savvy and good on them. We had just absolutely no idea. We knew what we didn't want to do, but everything was focused on the work. That's all that really mattered.
So what did you know that you didn't want to do?
Well, we knew that we didn't want to do the kind of architecture where you had no impact, like that what you were doing didn't have some kind of impact on the city and on people. So we were very interested in the things we ended up doing, libraries, schools. Dean particularly was interested in housing at that point, and I became very interested in housing. And we were really interested, in conceptually in certain kinds of work that was becoming like they were new typologies. So, for instance, one of our first jobs when we formed our own partnership was a very innovative shelter for a housing provider called Homes First. And it became what was called Strawn House. And they had done a similar thing a couple of years ago. And it came at a point, this was in the early 90s. And they had done one in the late 80s when it was the first round of really like a lot of homeless people. And so the city thought, well, we better, I don't know, make a shelter. And so Homes First, as housing provider, decided to really focus on that. And they actually thought that that Homes First would be a short-term kind of housing provider, that homelessness would be gone by the early 90s. That it was just this kind of freak occurrence because of
The recession. Yeah.
And so by the mid 90s, when we were hired by Homes First, homelessness had gotten even worse. They had become much more adept at identifying issues regarding how do you house homeless people. And so they had this idea about this very, very innovative shelter that A, combined men and women, which had never been done before, B, allowed people to stay longer term, which had never been done before, and became a kind of self-governing model. And so they wanted to hire someone who would work with them, who understood that our client was not necessarily Homes First, but the people we were designing the housing for. So we spent 6 months just talking to people under bridges and at drop-ins and just trying to figure out what the problems were and what they were looking for in housing. Like, why wouldn't they stay housed? What would stop you from, it's like, I don't know, look outside today, there's snow up to your waist. What would make you stay outside than go in somewhere? And to me and to Dean, those were incredibly important and creatively stimulating architectural issues.
Yeah.
And how you translate that, and the client also didn't want the overlay, so they were very forward thinking, and they said, well, you can't have master bedrooms, you can't. So they wanted to develop a whole new nomenclature for all of the rooms, and and there were things that they shared. They said, we've gained a lot of experience, and so one of the things we've noticed is you can't have just one door into a room unless it's a bedroom. Every other space, you got to have two ways in and out. And
why?
Because if someone felt at risk, someone else could territorialize the one way in or out.
Yeah.
And they said, that's really important because on an unconscious level, we think our clients will pick up on that and feel better. And also, it would help us formulate a new approach to staffing that was not about policing, because if we could build enough safeguards in, maybe we didn't need to have the same kind of staff-client relationship, because some things would look after themselves.
Right.
And so
that's a really interesting approach to this.
Yeah, it was very interesting, very innovative. And so there were a lot of things that we determined were really necessary as ways to keep people feeling safe and interested in staying indoors. And so one thing which has stuck to me to this day is a lot of people, and it doesn't take very long, and it's worse for women than men, don't feel, after sleeping rough for even a couple of months, actually it takes a big physical adjustment, like a psychic adjustment to living inside. And so we figured, maybe, so we said to the client, maybe the bedroom's like the end goal. Maybe they have to sleep in different places in the building to kind of acclimatize. And they're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, yeah, sure, let's try it out. So, we built a lot of places that were almost like little nooks. And we thought, oh, well, you can program it like a whole bunch of things. But if someone wants to just move their stuff into their room, because that was a kind of administrative thing. Like if the room was filled, you got your shelter pay.
Yeah.
But you might sleep in a little nook off of, I don't know, the main door or something. And so that was really interesting. And so we did that, and we did things like, it was very interesting architecturally, because we talked to a lot of folks about like what was home, and it became this kind of very kind of stream of consciousness admixture of things. Like home was like having a bathroom where you could lock the door and have a bath,
Hmm.
or arborite, like not P-lamp, but arborite counters. And we had always thought, okay, we're going to have stainless steel counters. It's bulletproof. You can wipe it down. I thought, no, because actually for them, that's institutional. And we're trying to tell them, no, this is a home.
Hmm.
So you start to read all these architectural signals, like it's like a semiotics, of architecture from a very specific perspective.
Well, I think what you spoke about, the entire time you're talking about this right now, all I'm thinking to myself is about you in university, your group of friends, and the possibility and the likelihood, as you described, of feeling powerless to some of the male professors or even students, and the inability to be able to have a safe exit from that scenario,
Mhm.
and how cyclical this is to then be able to provide people that don't have that in their current circumstance, the safety net of being able to exit from a
Mhm.
situation they're not comfortable with. And what a powerful way to start off your career.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And those are also things that now, schools are based on that kind of, except for a classroom,
Yeah.
which is sort of like a bedroom.
Well, but it has to be for safety
But
purposes.
for safety
Yeah,
purposes, that's
it's
right.
the
but
opposite. It's the opposite of those shared spaces.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really interesting. So,
Yeah.
it was just a great introduction. We developed, and it was in an old, like the way we had to design it, you could not do it and call it residential from a building code perspective. So, which had been really, and it was very unusual for the time. We hired a fire and life safety consultant. We said, we've got a real problem here, because it was a 3-story warehouse, and there were houses of 6 to 8 people in a house, but it was part of this floor plate. And then there was a really ambling circulation system. There were 2 really beautiful vertical stair systems, and then a horizontal corridor.
Mhm.
But it was very wide because for a lot of reasons. So,
Yep.
and we said to him, we have this really challenging issue, because we have these clusters of housing, or groups of houses
Yeah.
connected by a corridor, but we can't have any doors from the corridor to these houses. All has to be open, and this corridor is really large, very wide. So, and we have 2 open vertical circulation spaces that we can't have doors around, because you need to be able to hear things and see things.
Mhm.
And so he was so great, and he worked with us. We ended up going in, and we called it a hospital.
Hmm.
He said, I've thought this through. This is really challenging. The way to get this through is to call it a hospital, because if you call it a hospital, you can do all these things. And it was a really early lesson for us in how you can use
Plan and use
zoning
yeah,
and
yeah.
building code,
Yeah.
and a fire and life safety consultant to help you get around really silly,
Yeah.
you
Boundaries.
constraints.
I was going to say boundaries, because that's what
Boundaries.
you referred to before, that you
Yeah.
didn't want to have boundaries in school. So yeah.
Mhm. So that was really interesting. And, like another example, we did something for many years later for college for an organization called Native Child and Family Services. And they were they are a fantastic Indigenous organization that works all over the city, and they have some housing, but mostly services, service providers, from daycares to education classes. So they're consolidating all their admin, and they had also just recently been successful at petitioning the government, after many years of petitioning, for their own child CAS, so an Aboriginal CAS. So they needed they bought a building on College Street, and we renovated the whole thing for them to use for admin. And the ground floor was this kind of welcoming, multivalent program space for the Indigenous community. And on the roof, we planted a native plant garden with the 3 sisters, and a teaching garden, and a medicine garden. And we had because they didn't have any land at grade, we had a sweat lodge up on the roof. and we could not get a permit for the sweat lodge. We just got stopped all across the way, and they wanted us, and the temperatures in the sweat lodge were up to like 120 degrees. And the fire departments, they wanted us to have like an exit sign. And we're like, no, you don't understand. Like, not only will that not work, it'll melt, And so finally, we just said, okay, this is a place of worship. And if you tell them that they can't have, our client, that they can't have their place of worship and it needs to be outside, then it's a human rights issue. And they're like, oh, okay. And then, so we got it.
Yeah, no.
And
What Janna spoke to through Strong House, Native Child and Family Services in her own infill home is this. Design doesn't stop at the exterior wall. What happens inside, how a space feels, how it functions, how it supports the people who use it, matters just as much. That's where Sound Solutions comes in. They provide interior acoustic products that reduce reverberation and elevate how a space is experienced. In classrooms, libraries, offices, performance spaces, and restaurants, places where people gather, think, and connect, sound is part of the design. But it's not just about absorption, it's about aesthetics. Sound Solutions bring options like PET felt panels and fabric-wrapped fiberglass, acoustic plaster, perforated wood or metal, all flame-rated and visually considered. It's not just about noise reduction. It's about protecting focus, supporting communication, and helping people feel comfortable in the spaces we ask them to learn, work, and live in. Because design doesn't end at the envelope. If you want to learn more about Sound Solutions, feel free to email me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, @waldenhomes.ca.
So it taught us, like, from our first job, that from Strawn House, that there's a lot of creative thinking to get around things that are just, they're outdated.
Yeah. And also, the power of having the right consultants involved in a project can make or break a project.
Absolutely.
Right? And you cannot, I'm saying you as in like you as the architect, cannot be expected to have to look after all of this and know it all. It's too hard.
Yeah, it's just too hard.
There's too much information to be able to know it all.
Yeah.
So drawing on the right people and having those resources available is one of the main reasons why clients will seek you out. So what to me is already so interesting about what we've discussed in such a short period of time is how you have taken what you talked about in the beginning as the foundation and the groundwork of what your life was and what you grew up with, and just kind of ran with that into your professional career to have. So Sweat Lodge, I'm looking behind you now and looking at the Aboriginal artwork behind you. So the just this ability to be able to take what you're passionate about from an architectural standpoint and now find these projects with people where you can talk to your experience has got to be a pretty fulfilling thing to be able to participate in.
No, it is, and it is. Those are the that's the kind of architecture that we both really gravitated to. That it wasn't necessarily. So another example is, like, just as I was saying, the house we're sitting in is a 5-unit condo. We'd always wanted to do something like this, and no one would let us. No one was hire us to do it, so we did it ourselves. Before that, the first thing we did in that way was we had always wanted to build a mid-block demonstration, just like this is a demonstration of intensifying a single-family lot. That was a demonstration of how can you build a really great, very modest scaled house that has flexibility to move from 1 to 2 family very easily. So, like, what is really, when people say, oh, this is so flexible, what does that actually mean architecturally? And in some ways it was always like, oh, I love warehouse spaces. They're so flexible. They're so open. So it's like, well, what is it about that makes it so flexible and open? Is it the fact that it was all wood? So you could change things, so get really at the heart of that. So we always wanted to do that. And because we were always very interested in environmental and sustainable initiative, that we we felt like we worked with sustainability professor at Waterloo, and we identified that like the average middle class house before the war was about 1,500 square feet above grade. And it was only after the war, with cheap energy that things could, get to be really
Increase.
bloated.
Yeah.
And, so we said, okay, so we're going to build a 1,500 square foot house. We're going to demonstrate that through good design, it can feel really as good, if not better, than a house 3 times that size. And we also wanted to plant the roofs so that we could have like a 0 lot coverage, because it was at a point when stormwater management was just starting to come in, and you were getting all these really ugly landscapes to deal with stormwater management. So if you didn't separate the house and your site, you could actually think about it as one ecology, and they could work together. So on Euclid, we bought it was an old workers' cottage, couldn't say the thing, and built this 2-family house. We lived in it. Our family lived in the whole thing, and then when our kids moved away, we made it into a 2-family, like literally over a weekend, and all the roofs were planted.
I was going to say, sounds like a very dirty weekend.
Oh yeah, it was, and it required ordering the kitchen cabinets before, but everything was plumbed and ready.
Yeah, of course.
And
I'm just thinking about the drywall dust and then what it would have been like at the end of that day, to take that shower and how good that shower felt.
Yeah, really good. And so again, it was really interesting because it was more about the space. And people not really going like, I can't believe this is such a small space. We're like, it's actually not a small space, but it's what design can make. And it was mid-block. We really wanted that one to be mid-block because we could show how, you could work a section so you could get light into the center of the space, and that you could get really great passive ventilation so you didn't need AC.
In the kind of architecture Janna describes, where every move serves performance, comfort, and clarity, your envelope matters more than ever. That's where the doors comes in. They supply high-performance European windows, doors, and curtain wall systems designed to elevate energy modeling, meet passive level performance, and support the architectural vision from day one. They're early collaborators, not late-stage suppliers. Whether it's standard or custom finishes, color-matched frames, or deep integration with detailing and thermal targets, the doors makes it possible to honor great design while staying on budget. From contemporary builds to adaptive reuse, they understand that your envelope is your promise of comfort, performance, and integrity. They are designed to perform and built to last. If you want to learn more about the doors, feel free to email me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, @waldenhomes.ca, and I will connect you directly with them.
And how the green roofs with a sprinkler system actually reduce the temperature a couple of degrees. So you could actually just model all that stuff. So again, it was the same, to me, it's the same trajectory of saying, I've got this really architecturally, there's these issues I want to work on. And how do you make something really interesting like that? That's not just about itself, but actually pushes the conversation forward. Just like this is pushing the conversation forward. And so, from a business perspective, that was really when we did the house on Euclid, that was really our ability then. It was like the best business card we could ever have, because people were like, I can't believe you fit all this in here. I'd like you to work with us and do that. And, that just kind of grew. And what I realized that was really interesting is, I don't know if you get it in your business, but in mine, you get phone calls from people. And after about 5 minutes, I say, well, have you looked at our website? Because I don't think what you want is really what we do. And honestly, if I could think of someone to recommend you to, I would do that. And sometimes I do. But because of that project and now this project, it kind of self-sorts people. Like anyone who comes to you, they know what you're about, and they're interested in how you think and how you design.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could tell you because I vet all of our clientele. I am the one on the phone with them, and one of the first questions I ask is, how did you come to us and what do you know about us?
Right.
Because if you're not doing that and they haven't done any of that research, well, then are they really the right people? Because I mean, really, you want people that know what they want in some way, or they can get there through that conversation.
Yeah.
But they've at least done some level of research.
Yeah, and I think I've learned the hard way that a client can be really tough and really challenging, but if I don't actually understand them, it's not a good relationship. Like, it's not going to work out well, and it's not a judgment thing. Like, you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, there's someone for everyone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There is. And you can see it in the relationships of people that are partners, and you can see it in business partnerships.
Yeah.
There's generally someone out there for everyone. So we might not be the right fit, but you can go find the other person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've talked about some of these projects, and we're like really riveting, interesting projects that fulfill such a need. When you opened the practice and you said that you didn't have a business plan and it was the two of you landed some of these projects, how did you see the business grow organically without having had the plan? Was it the lead-in of some of these projects that allowed you and afforded you the opportunity to meet other people? Were you going after RFPs? How did you work on developing projects?
It was a combination. So we learned about RFPs, and we thought, oh, well, we'll have to do RFPs, because I don't even know how Strawn House came to us. It must have been an RFP.
And did you have the opportunity to work on RFPs when you were in university? How did you learn to fulfill the RFP requirements?
By failing enough times.
I wanted you to say it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so again,
Totally.
I'm gonna say this: if you're listening to this and you're a student or you're a young architect, you got to know that you are going to fail more times than you're going to succeed.
Oh, absolutely, and you only learn by the failures in that, especially in that sense. Like every colleague and friend I have, it's like if I say, "Okay, tell me about the one RFP that you missed by a minute," and everybody has that story, and everybody has a story where they forgot to, I don't know, stamp the RFP or whatever, like just the ones that you wake up sweating in the middle of the night going, shit, 3 weeks for nothing. I forgot that. And why it comes then, I don't know. But
because you were so in it, right?
Yeah.
You're like a horse with blinders on, trying to move through the documentation to get to the submission date. Yeah. I mean, look, we deal with it on the completion of projects and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's tough.
So how far into the practice, how many years into the practice were you, or months into the practice were you, when you established that it was beyond just the two of you to be able to fulfill the requirements of the projects you had on the boards?
Not that long, probably a year or two after we started, we had one or two people working with us, but it was very cyclical. We'd hire them for like a contract gig and then they'd leave. And at a certain point, we had Strawn House and another project coming out. And it was the first time I actually articulated, oh no, these projects are coming out. And then what do we do?
We've won.
Like, what do we do? And gee, I like the people working with us and be really great to have them stay. But I don't know, how are we going to make a commitment? And so we actually hired a woman. She'd taken out an ad in Azure magazine, something like Joanna Hoffman. And it was about business development. I didn't even know what those words meant, but it somehow aligned with my light bulb going off that everything could fall apart really quickly after feeling like really chuffed that we had work and people working for us. And
check us out.
Yeah, exactly. So we hired her, and she basically gave us a crash course in how to run a business and how do you do business development. Like, how do you follow a lead? Who do you call? How do you do an RFP?
What Janna has modeled through decades of practice is something every designer and architect, really every creative entrepreneur, can relate to: the need to evolve, to lead with conviction, to stay sharp, and stay connected. That's exactly what Kaplan's Masterclass series is about. It's not just about appliances, it's about building a business. They equip architects and designers with real tools from architects and designers that they bring in as panelists. They communicate how to sell with confidence, how to build value, how to integrate product knowledge into powerful, client-ready thinking. It's technical, it's strategic, and it's rooted in respect for the design profession. Kaplan's isn't just a showroom, it's a destination, a hub, not just a big box store. A place where relationships are built, knowledge is shared, and where entrepreneurial designers and architects get the support they need to grow, not just in their craft, but in their business. If you want to learn more, feel free to email me at jonathan@waldenhomes.ca. That's JONATHAN@waldenhomes.ca.
So we were doing an RFP with another architecture firm for a community center, and she kind of coached us through that. So we learned a lot through doing that. And, you know, in those days it was a Rolodex, and she was like, "What? You don't have a Rolodex?" So we got a Rolodex and we figured out how to use it. And
I have to explain to anyone listening, okay? If you're born post, I don't know, 1990, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, you probably don't know what the term Rolodex means. You might have heard it in movies or seen it in other things. Maybe not. But it is essentially a card that has a cutout on the bottom, two separate cutouts, and it sits into a housing. And on both sides of the dial, you can rotate the dials. And on each of these cards, depending on how the size of it or depending on how many people you had, you could have numbers for people. It's like almost like their business card in some way, or this was your telephone book, your personalized telephone book. You would rotate it and you would have all the contact information for people on top of these cards. That's what a Rolodex is. Apologize for the long-winded explanation, but so you could imagine, and it was all alphabetized. So you would rotate it to find your contacts. This is not open your phone and say, call so-and-so.
Right.
And if the card went missing, the contact was gone.
Totally gone. There were no computers.
And every now and again, they would fall off and they'd be in the bottom of the Rolodex.
Right.
Sorry.
That's right.
Go ahead. I apologize for the...
That's so great. Yeah. Anyway, so that's how and then we just went from there. You know, we just grew, and we enjoyed it. You know, there was never, and there still isn't any desire to be a certain size. That was just never a motivation. But we enjoy a certain scale of work. And what we started to understand is you can't get to that scale of work unless you have a certain size office.
Right.
So that became a motivation, you know, in a way to do that. That wasn't just about like, you know, those really boring conversations you have, like, oh, so how big's your office? Like, I just couldn't care less, like, about that part of it.
Yeah, it was more so about the work.
It was about the work.
Yeah. As your work grows, so does the space around it. And when architecture reaches for more clarity, more contrast, more presence, you need elements that meet that ambition. Berman Stairs builds custom stair systems that elevate both form and function. With over 30 years of deep relationships with top-tier suppliers, they deliver sculptural precision at the speed and cost your project demands. Glass, steel, wood, and stone, crafted into floating treads, sculpted stringers, and dramatic lines of movement, reshape not just the circulation, but the identity of space. Whether you're drawing light into a tight footprint or creating a signature gesture in an open plan, Berman makes the ascent and descent meaningful. They don't just build stairs, they build value, visually, materially, and experientially. This is where craftsmanship meets ambition. If you want to learn more about Berman Stairs, feel free to email me. It's Jonathan, JONATHAN @waldenhomes.ca. And I'm happy to tell you what it's like working with them and connecting you with them.
And so, it just like for everyone out there who's starting out, you pick up so much along the way. And if you have colleagues that you can talk to, and share information with, it's really helpful. So we had some colleagues that we could share information with and talk to, and that was super helpful.
Right. So what did it look like a couple of years in terms of types of projects that you had? Because you've referenced a few of them. And so what did it look like? Were you able to take on, would it be 10 projects or less or more? What was it like?
We probably had, like, after 5 years, we probably had 6 people. We could have 5 or 6 projects going on at a time. And then 5 years later, it was maybe 12 people, then 20, 25, 30. We grew very gradually.
Okay.
And we've held around 35, 40 for the last 10 years.
Okay.
So it seems to be a sweet spot for us.
And because I have this conversation with so many people, do you ever have the point, and I'm assuming, well, actually, I won't say my assumption. Do you get to a point in a year where you can sometimes panic that I've got this group of people that I'm feeding, and I've got to make sure that we can continue with our sales? Does that?
Oh, 100% all the time. That doesn't ever leave. It's a terrifying thing.
Mm-hmm.
When COVID hit, it was a very terrifying thing.
Right. Again, I say this because people can look at a portfolio of work and they can say, wow, like this is incredible. And one of the main reasons why we wanted to engage in this type of a dialogue with our partners was because of this. Like, this is the human side of what it is to run the business. And so there's the glory in being able to design it and see it and watch it come to fruition. But there's the other side of it where, if you're an intern architect, or you're a junior, or you're intermediate, or you're a senior architect, and you're kind of working your way up the chain, you don't yet have the fear
right
that comes with the ownership.
Yeah.
And when the insurance company calls and says, by the way, there's nothing we can do, but the rates are going up on your policy.
Mm-hmm.
Not because of over claiming or anything like that, just because of nature of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And now your policy is going to cost you $35,000 more a year or $50,000 more a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
The juniors don't think of that. They don't know that. And so I just want to make sure that people are aware that there is the associated feeling of ownership.
Yeah. And it's so one thing that we've done that's very unusual, and it's part of what self-sorts who ends up staying with us, is for us, partly because we actually need and always needed to make a living. Like, we didn't have other independent resources.
Yeah. Yep.
And also we really felt that one of the main, I would say, criticisms we had of architecture as a business and as a culture was the fact that there was this idea like it was a calling, it wasn't a business. And that, what were hours when you were doing something, that was part of your calling. And we were like, look, we are as passionate as anybody else about what we do, but we actually have to make a living, and this is actually a business.
Yes.
And so we very early on we had project budgets, and the most junior person and the most senior person, everyone once a week would meet about the project budget, and we would have the project manager fill in the project budget, and there was accountability. And that was a number of things. It was partly, this is a business, like we learned the hard way. And we all rely on everyone contributing. It's everyone, all architecture is only about people's hours. And so everyone contributes to that being successful or not successful. And we pay overtime. And that's, I'm not saying like, oh, we're so great, we pay overtime, but we just have a lot of hours, even more than firms that don't pay overtime. So the only way you can manage that is to actually educate your staff on what the business aspects are. And what I came to really realize and believe is that there are some projects, and our attitude is there are some projects that you'll lose money on. And you make a business decision that you'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very clear, and we talk to our staff about why we're doing that in this. But we don't just say, okay, so you don't have to do a project budget. We say it's going to lose money.
Yeah.
But so look, you're going to see how much hours are going to go in that are not
Non-billable.
We're subsidizing those
Yes.
non-billable
It's a
hours.
sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. And so we can have conversations about why it is that certain types of projects lose money. And so that's very interesting. So people who are interested in that are interested in working for us. And they're the ones who tend to be interested in working on the kinds of projects we work on, because they see the relationship between the value maybe that a culture puts on certain kinds of projects. Even a middle class single family house is very hard to do well on the number of hours you actually get compensated for. And then what I also came to realize is that for me, it's a kind of energy proposition. So there's the energy you put in,
Mm-hmm.
and then the energy that is to build it. There's actually a kind of tangible relationship between the two. So if it's, say, a middle class house, and let's say the hours would support, I'm just going to spitball, 100 hours. That 100 hours comes from the construction fee. And that construction fee sort of represents amount of work. And as you get good at what you do, you realize if I spend 500 hours on the contract docs, but the project budget is only 100 hours, I'm sort of over designing. So I'm going towards a really bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not doing right by the client, and I'm not doing right by us. And so you have to have those kinds of conversations and say the energy you put in then gets translated to the energy to actually make something. And so what you want to do is align those activities. And to me, that works. It doesn't matter what the project type is. It's actually really understanding the value of your work in relation to the final objective, which is the construction of something. And so what it helps you do in our case is we actually understand now if a house is, I don't know, let's say it's a house and it's $1 million for 2,000 square feet, or it's $3 million for 2,000 square feet. We can actually understand where we should direct our energy based. And that's not about design, because you can always produce good design, but it's how do you express that,
Mm-hmm.
those goals? And so that's become actually a really interesting thing that a lot of people, again, in the office are really interested in, because it helps you hone your craft. Because I always felt like there was nothing worse than killing yourself and thinking through all these great ideas and drawing them all, only to find out that they were too expensive. Like you never got to try anything,
Right.
like see it actually built.
So were you working in many of these circumstances? Are you working internally to develop the budget? Are you working with a construction manager, project manager?
Yeah.
Collectively.
Initially, we were just doing it internally,
Yeah.
and then we'd send it out for tender. But depending on the sector, now sometimes we'll work with a construction manager, a project manager after SD. And so even in the SD phase, it's like if you have X budget, you might say, we need somehow to get another 500 square feet for this program. So what's the best way to do it? We've got one move.
Yeah.
Are we going to do it in the back and have footings and this and that? Or is there a good way to do it on the roof?
Yeah.
Like, so you just start those conversations right off the bat.
Yep.
And so then, like, you spend your time actually creatively as opposed to dreaming.
Yeah. In allocating the design resources
Mm-hmm.
towards something that can ultimately be constructed.
Yeah.
And you're not in la la land.
Yeah. And really disappointing your client.
And then hitting the client at a later phase with, oh man, I'm so sorry, this is going to cost you way too much.
Yeah.
Let's go back and redesign.
And it's also a way, it goes back to, it supports a kind of basic premise of having a small budget is not an excuse for poor design. You can do good design, and good design thinking makes a better project. It doesn't matter what it is you're doing. And so if you can develop enough knowledge at your craft, then you're allowing your client to maximize their budget.
Yeah.
Not based on you can't afford this, but oh, look what your budget can help you achieve,
Right.
which is a really positive way to think about it. And it's allowed us to, so we Albert Campbell Library was a project that just opened 2 years ago for the Toronto Public Library System. Mid-century library, really a kind of classic, very interesting. And they wanted to expand, but they were quite constrained. They had a really constrained budget. And my partner Brock was actually able to explain to them how he could accommodate all their program growth within the existing building envelope. So that meant he could conserve so much of the budget to redo the existing building interiors rather than just, have this kind of sprawling thing where you're really pushing the budget just to get a decent building envelope and things like that. So it doesn't matter on the sector. It's about an approach to architecture.
It's an interesting. One of the other people I'd spoken to about this similar type of philosophy was when I talked to Jen Cutlets at Studio AC about one of their first projects being this condo unit, and they had $40,000 to go rent out this condo. It's like, what do you do with $40,000? Well, you come up with some creative design, and you figure it out. And that's not to say that every single project can be that way, but if the mentality is to try to figure it out in that regard, well, then you're probably going to be more successful with the projects that you have than the projects that you don't have because you told them they can't do it.
Yeah.
It's a nice strategy towards looking at this. I'm curious to know, over the course of the career, have you had the opportunity to mentor people?
Well, I'd say mentor the people in the office for sure.
Yeah.
And then I taught at Waterloo for many years. I just stopped a year or two ago.
Okay.
I have a very close relationship with a bunch of students that I taught that kept in touch, most of them women. And I wouldn't say it's like an official mentorship program. So that keeps going.
Okay. And for yourself, did you have a mentor when you entered the field? Was there any? No. So again, now I'm going to say to anyone that would listen to this to remember that. And that's why when this whole conversation started, I had alluded to the fact that, Janna is very much a trailblazer, and that you didn't have someone to turn to in that way as a substantial senior that you could go run ideas off of and bounce ideas off of and do all of those things. So it's a different time then to what it is now. And I think that in many ways, because of what you had experienced, then it becomes this wholesome experience for you to be able to go and have those types of relationships.
No, absolutely. And I think it's a different time. Like, I think younger practitioners, there's a lot more women in the field.
Yeah.
And there's a lot less, like, all the issues when I was in school, they don't really exist anymore. Like, you don't have the sexual harassment that we all had. And there's lots of things you can do about it, and people are educated on that. And it's a thing, like, you can't even design grade school or post-secondary school with a solid door into a private office. There always has to be glass. Like, there is no opportunity to have, like, the level of privacy that would promote or support the kinds of things that happened when I was in university. And that's very positive. And I think a lot of younger practitioners generally are much more interested. So we always did a lot of adaptive reuse and renovations and additions. And we were always like, well, this is great work. And why would you build something new when you can just adaptively reuse something? Because it all takes, like, carbon. And
I was just going to go there.
It's just crazy.
So wasteful.
It's so wasteful.
Yeah.
Like, I just hate the idea of waste. And
I have that conversation every morning when I look at the plates in front of me or the bowls in front of me for my kids.
Oh, I know.
Please don't throw that out.
I can't. I'm like the person who's always like, "You're not eating that? Okay, can we pack that up to go home?"
Yeah.
It's so terrible. It makes my kids crazy.
Well,
but
sorry.
Yeah. And it was, again, I find younger people, like, it's really interesting for them. It's all about sustainability, but they're quite happy to do just renovations and additions. They don't have the same thing, like, oh, I'd be so happy if I could do a new build, and they don't actually care.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really great.
Because it comes back to what you said before, and that is that it's about the design,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And sometimes the constraints of a building are just you have to figure that out.
Well, yeah, and it also, I think it's about the design, and they think good design can be achieved in an addition or renovation or adaptive reuse, but it also it synthesizes a kind of political position and a design perspective. So they'll say, I'm quite happy to do this because from a carbon perspective, I'm not taxing our environment unnecessarily. And in fact, I'm saving so much on the embodied carbon. And my goal is to figure out how to reduce the operating carbon. So and they don't feel like it's a compromise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they feel like there's a convergence between what they do in their professional life and their life as a citizen.
I've loved this so far, Janna. I appreciate
Oh,
all
good.
this time. I want to ask you about outside of practice. Actually, before I go outside of practice, I will ask you a question about kind of future proofing the practice and what that looks like. Have you got to a point now where you start looking at what succession planning looks like, or have you not gone there yet?
Oh no, we started on that a long time ago. Like, I think we were your classic mom and pop originally, and we grew to be more sophisticated than that from a business perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so we realized early on that this model would only be successful if we wanted it to continue. We had to do it early on so that people would stay, and also that we could increase the intelligence quotient in the firm. And also, just in the bigger scheme of things, like if you're not changing, you're behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so we eventually took on, we have, at one point, there was Dean and I and 3 other partners, and we were all equal owners. Dean sold his ownership share several years ago. He's still a partner. I sold mine recently, but I'm still a partner. So and that's been going on. The partnership, like Gaining Partners, has happened. Brock was our first partner, and that was probably 20 years ago. So, again, it was partly to keep it fresh, and partly because we knew it's different. A sole practitioner is different than, say, particularly a married couple running a partnership. There's very different dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And a sole practitioner can they can kind of fold up their shop in a way that someone else can still leverage that, but it's different. I think externally how people see a partnership when it's a couple is very different. And so we wanted to really neutralize that and signal that that's not what this was about.
I have to ask a naive question, so I apologize in advance. Was the practice ever called Levitt Goodman Architects?
It was called, it's so interesting. Initially it was called Public Work.
It was.
Which we loved.
Okay.
And then people were like, do you do sewage work? So literally. So we thought, well, this was a really cool name, but probably a bad idea. So then we called it Levitt Goodman.
Yeah.
And then John Bentley Mays was like, that's a shitty name. It sounds like you should just be doing houses in Forest Hill. Thanks, John. And so, but then when Brock joined, it was really changing the name to something more neutral without losing the heritage.
That's what I figured. I assumed that the LGA was actually the part of the succession planning.
Yeah.
And Architectural Partners is such a great sounding completion to the name.
Yeah.
Because if you can think about this as you listen to this, if you think about what architectural partner means, literally, and you dissect those 2 words, it is about, at the core, design and collaboration, right? Like that's what this is. It's not, we are the hierarchy. It is not, we sit on our throne. It is not that. It is like, let's figure this out together. We'll design it and let's figure it out together, which is great. So, okay. So answer the succession planning question. Appreciate that. In moving past that, I now want to ask you about like yourself. As you have through all the previous years of your life and moving forward in your life, what are the things that you have enjoyed doing for yourself that allow you to in some ways let go of the stress of what running a practice is?
Well, I haven't really managed to let go of the stress of running a practice.
I thought that would be the case.
You know, the 50-hour weeks are still a reality. But what I would say, and I don't think it's the same with all practice, like all my colleagues, but I would say one of the things that we've been super fortunate, and I've been super fortunate, is I was able to teach at Waterloo for many years and learned. So I gained another kind of community there of people that I could call on to ask questions, but also people working on a whole bunch of different things that I found really interesting. And then I've also, and this is, I would say the same for Dean, the clients, like we've actually become good friends. Well, it's probably a dozen clients, like very good friends over the years. And that's really unusual. And not just house clients, like public sector clients who just I just enjoy being around them. And they're not architects. And so there's always really incredibly stimulating conversations, dinner parties. Now we joke, we do our sauna diplomacy. Like we just drag people into the sauna after dinner half the time now. And people are like,
Good way to digest.
Yeah. But it's really, it's just fantastic. And I continue to be extremely interested in the arts. That's really what most things revolve around for me.
You say that, and I have an interesting thing that I recognize while I'm here, and that is that you had said that early on you had studied film, and I don't see a TV in the house.
It's upstairs.
Okay. Yeah, because I realized that I'm like, there's no TV around, which in many ways forces you to engage in a different type of medium, which could be something as basic as what we're doing right now, and that's talk to each other. Which I find most people don't do anymore. Yeah.
Well, this is, we have lots of guests, lots of dinner parties, and that is just, and I would say, like, to get back to where we were at the beginning, like my parents always had tons of dinner parties with really interesting people. And we were always, included in it, or I'd sit at the top of the stairs and peek and, eavesdrop on what people were talking about. And that, I would say the biggest constraint now is, I would have no compunction flying to New York to see a show. Like I'd go in Porter in the morning, go see something that was up that I was really interested in, fly back, and it was a really inexpensive way to do things. And now I think, I know, but the carbon, I just can't do it,
Well, to that point, I'll actually say this. Now, this is going to get released later than today, like much later than where we are today. But I will tell you that this morning, Paul Simon tickets to Massey Hall went on sale. And so did the Lumineers. Paul Simon's one of my longtime favorites. Yeah. I was just so excited. And Lumineers are one of my current favorites. Yeah. Both tickets more or less sold out within 30 minutes.
Wow.
And the cost of going to these shows is unaffordable.
Yeah.
It's not the carbon that you talk about, but the wanting to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Can't enjoy it. You can't enjoy it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's too expensive.
Yeah. It's really crazy.
Janna, I thank you. Thank you for inviting me into your house. It's not often that I come to someone else's house, and so thank you for having me in it. It's beautiful. If you're listening to this, I would highly recommend that you head over to our Instagram page. I'm going to assume that one of the projects you might want to feature on our Instagram page when this comes out might be this.
Sure.
And so for you as a listener to be able to see where we are sitting now at the dining room table, and how beautiful the space is, and how well thought out and thought through this experience is of being inside this home. I appreciate you. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate the openness to talk about elements of the practice that some people may or may not want to discuss. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm grateful for you having me.
My pleasure. And thank you for the roti. We had a good lunch.